think it's good enough. We haven't done one of these in
I know, so long.
a minute. So all of our children are currently napping.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's pretty crazy that,
Yeah.
like, they're all asleep in different rooms right now.
All asleep in different rooms. So we're gonna do this now because we don't have another time to do it.
I was gonna drive home, put my kids to sleep, and then we're gonna do this virtually, and then Ryan,
and one of your kids fell asleep in the car.
and we're like, okay, we're transitioning him. We're doing it.
Yeah. So here we are. What's happened since
I
we
don't even know
chatted?
what to say. I mean, well, it's funny because since our last intro, you have come up with a plan.
Oh yeah.
And it's like none of the options we talked about in.
You're right.
Yes. And what's crazy is just it reflects how much things change within days.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like when I found out I was going to Boston.
Yep.
Like while we were recording, and then it like happened.
I know. That
Yeah.
was like one of the most wild things.
It's insane. But yeah, I think I can share now.
Yeah.
I'm enrolled in a trial at UCLA.
Thank God.
Thank goodness.
Los Angeles. Woot woot.
It's here, close by. I don't have to be inpatient, except for it is a surgical trial. So I'll have my third brain surgery. Insane. But I don't have to be inpatient for the actual treatment itself, which is really nice. So I can just like go there. It's like either a 30-minute infusion, or when I get the actual treatment itself, it's a 2-hour experience. So
maybe after CAR T, this will feel like easy.
like hopefully. I think it will, especially because I'm here.
Right.
And I can like see my family and see my friends.
Right.
Afterwards. Whereas before I was alone in like a high-rise apartment in Boston.
Yeah, you're like having existential crises.
Yeah, it wasn't great. So I am doing the DC-Vax, which is a dendritic cell vaccine. This was actually created, like the beginnings of it were like 20 years ago, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
It's been in a phase 3 trial. It's actually past a phase 3 trial. The reason why it's held up in the like FDA approval process is because they actually opened it up for people who had it before. They could get like expanded access to it if they had a recurrence. So it sort of muddies the data a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the like CAR T was so experimental.
Yeah, so new.
And this has a lot of data, and this is one of the trials that we wanted you to get in the moment we found out about your diagnosis, because there is really good data.
Like there's one guy in the Facebook group who's been alive for like 23 years.
Yeah.
Now, he's never had recurrence, and he did get it as like a newly diagnosed patient. So all of those factors work in his favor. But 23 years, that's wild. So crazy. Really unheard of in this community.
And I think they deem 20% of the people in that trial were long-term survivors.
Yeah.
And it improves survival rate, like doubles it. And it just, there's a lot of data. Obviously it doesn't work for 100% of the people, but I just feel like this is something we've been really wanting. And for anyone who's ever donated to that, the Ironman that our friends
the gala.
did, that's who this money's going to, supporting
it's supporting the research and these trials at UCLA. So thank you to anybody who's donated, and I'm actually really stoked to be a part of this trial and like this organization, because we did work like closely with them. We got to see their research lab. So it feels like it's kind of full circle. So yeah, tomorrow I start my first infusion. That's the only part of the trial that's blinded, meaning there's a placebo. So either you get the immunotherapy ahead of surgery, or you get a placebo ahead of surgery. So fingers crossed that I get the immunotherapy. But the cool thing is that once the trial is over, you get unblinded after your last vaccine, and then everyone has access to the immunotherapy. Yeah. So really they're just trying to see if giving the immunotherapy prior to surgery makes any sort of clinical difference.
Right. And I also like this because it is able to then bring DC-Vax back into the trial setting, because if it was just hanging out post phase 3 pre-FDA approval, no one would be able to get access to this treatment. And so I'm really glad they figured out a way. How can we bring this back into the trial setting? Yeah. And even though the data is like muddy because there's no real placebo group, we know what the alternative is. Yeah. Like the data is very...
The alternative is people have recurrence quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I know it's available in Europe. It's FDA approved just in the UK, but it's like $150,000. You have to be go to the UK to get it done. I mean, it's like a really intense process. So to be able to be part of a clinical trial is really exciting. And yeah, I'm just glad to have a plan.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
So today, actually, when this is coming out, you will be getting your infusion.
I will be. 30-minute infusion of an immunotherapy drug, hopefully, or placebo.
Yeah.
And then
isn't that crazy? Like you're usually in a medical setting, like what's happening. It's just like weird to be getting potentially like you're blinded to something in a medical setting. That's just really interesting to me.
I know, but that's like how they have to do it to prove efficacy. I mean, in this particular situation, they're not testing whether or not the vaccine is
right. They're trying to see like how do we improve
the vaccine? Like how do we do what do they call it? Adjuvant therapies? Or something.
It's like how to improve the efficacy of DC-Vax.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we were all really hoping that I was going to get into this trial, and I did. So
yep.
Yeah, feeling good about it, feeling good about the plan, happy to be near home, and just, happy to just have a plan, honestly. Right. Like those weeks where I didn't have a plan were really tough.
Oh my God, yeah, I know. I think it just is very grounding for everyone. Yeah. Am I allowed to talk about what happened yesterday?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yesterday we had our friends over at my place, Katie and Alex and their kids, and it was very fun. Actually, we had like a full day.
We had a great day, yeah.
And then we saw the kids later, and it was, I mean, like you didn't take a nap at all yesterday. No. Your appetite seems back. You're like eating full meals.
Fully, yeah.
And
I feel very like normal mostly.
Yeah. And then I saw you on the couch around, I don't know, 6 p.m. and I saw you looking at your hand.
Yep.
I'm like, Jordy, you good?
And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I did feel good in that moment.
I think you're like, I felt a feeling, but it went away.
Yeah, like I felt a feeling in my hand that was different.
Frankie?
Sorry if you can hear the dog. Like she just wants to come in. So I started feeling like this tingling sensation that I get before I have a seizure in my hand, but then it went away. So I was like, oh, okay.
And that's happened a couple times now. Like last week I was driving you home and you're like, I felt a feeling and then it went away.
Yeah. And like nothing happened from it.
Which I think is like the medications are trying to like stop it and the seizures wanting to happen. It's like, what a weird thing. So then an hour and a half later, we're sitting outside and I could see you. Like I could see you like internally like processing something. And it was like a 10-second thing that I saw.
Yeah.
And right when I was about to say something,
I was like, I think I'm going to have a seizure.
Yeah.
So I get this like, I think it's similar to a migraine where you get like,
I know, it's so weird that I can like understand.
Because it is kind of the same thing.
I know, because how I feel is like my migraine needs to go through the brain. They say it is like inflammation.
Well, it is inflammation.
Yeah.
So yeah, you get like this aura beforehand, and it's like, I wish I could explain the feeling in my hand. It's like a numb, tingling, heavy feeling.
Yeah.
Like my hand just feels like really large and then like tingly.
Yeah.
And then I like feel like really uncoordinated in the hand.
Which obviously makes you want to like look at it. So that's when
then I'm just like looking at it and I'm like, I think I might have a seizure. And so then we're like, okay, like and the kids, we had put on TV for the kids because we just wanted to have a little adult time.
I know, it's so annoying that like we're like, hey, let's go. Hey kids, go inside. Let's go talk. Literally 1 minute later,
I like start feeling whatever. So then we like go into Erica's room and we're like all sitting in the dark,
like laying on
her bed, and we're just like waiting. And it was like a mini seizure. Like it never fully presented itself, which is good because that means my medicine's working.
Yeah, but it took a long time.
Yeah, it was like 25 minutes.
I think it was like 45.
45 minutes before I felt like I could stand up and like walk, and it even took longer. Like I got home and I like still felt kind of weird, But it never fully presented as like a full-on seizure where I was having like
I can just like
tremors.
imagine like in your brain it's trying to compete, the seizure wanting to take place. I don't even know what that means, but that's what it feels like to me.
It's like
and the
an electrical like
right, and the medicine's like stopping the impulses, and the impulse is like they're having a war inside your brain of who's gonna win.
Yeah, like, well, medicine won.
Yeah,
thank
great.
goodness. But it's just I did have a seizure a few days before that.
Yeah,
that was very intense, and so I was sort of worried that was going to happen. But I went up on medicine since then, and I'm glad that it didn't manifest as like a full-on seizure.
And like we know the tumor's it's getting, in my mind, it's quite large. It's not.
It is. Yeah, it's a big guy.
Yeah.
In there.
Started cussing to Gus.
Oh yeah. So Alex,
Okay.
Alex was there with us, and so Hank is like my.
I hear a child screaming.
So we're back.
I feel like I have to whisper now.
I know. Now we're in a dangerous territory with the napping children.
So we got like 15 minutes in, and then my child was going head first off the bed.
Yep.
So,
I mean, to be fair, she sleeps in a way different kind of bed.
right.
It's like on the floor.
Yeah. I don't even remember
what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like really remember either. We were just talking about like the trial, we're glad I'm in it, the seizures.
But anyway,
so that's where we're at right now. That's the latest update for me.
Yeah, it's like kind
Any
of
updates for you? We always do updates for me. What's happening in your world?
My update is I launched my new TFMR parent course. So
it's very exciting.
Yeah. So if anyone has experienced a termination for medical reasons, because I have people all around the world reaching out to me on Instagram, like asking for therapy, and I can't do that because I'm not licensed in those places, or they want to use insurance and pay a copay. So this is a way to reach more people, and it's using what I use in therapy, but in a course for parents.
And I've looked at the course and also was there when you recorded it.
I mean, you heard everything.
I heard every single thing, and like you just give so many good skills. I mean, that are helpful even beyond, I think, just TFMR. But I'm super excited that it's out in the world now.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
That's exciting. That's, I guess, my main update right now.
Main update. Okay. Yeah, I should always check in with you. See what's happening.
That's okay. I mean, it's a hard thing to go from one topic to, I mean, we just talk all the time. It just feels weird to announce this.
No, but I think it's like amazing. Right. And we have people listening to our podcast.
Right, that's true.
Who are listening specifically for that reason. They've been through a similar experience to yours, and now they're part of our little community.
Now they're part of our fan club. Yeah. But then it feels really weird, on that note, to get into our topic today, just like based on everything we've said, because it is really uncomfortable.
Yeah. So what's cool, what I love about our podcast is that we get to bring on people that we don't know, and like learn all about them and their experience. And then sometimes we get to bring on people that we do know, and this is one of those episodes. So Hank's best friend from college, Benji Goldman, is a funeral director.
Yep.
And we thought, who better to talk to on Grief Street than someone who is in the business of death? And I think I learned so much about what it is to be a funeral director, and how much you have to give of yourself, and how much empathy and compassion you have to have. I just learned so much in this episode, and I think it's so interesting when someone is around death like on a daily basis. We wanted to learn like what are Benji's ideas and what are his like thoughts around death, like in a more personal way, given that he works in this industry.
Yep. So with that, I mean, I had ideas going into this, and I was surprised by some of the things he said. So I'm excited in a weird way for all of you to listen, just to see if you also were surprised by some of the things that he talked about and that you have to go through to become a funeral director.
Yep.
And we hope that you enjoy the episode.
I hope you enjoy it too. I thought it was really fascinating, so I'm excited for you guys to listen. Here's Benji Goldman from the Goldman Funeral Group in Chicago. Hi, Benji.
Hi, guys. How are
Hi.
you?
Thanks for joining us on Grief Street.
It's an honor. It's an
We've been
absolute
talking
honor.
about having you on for many, many months now.
I know.
Oh my gosh. Well, unfortunately you're dealing with the worst person in terms of scheduling and organizing. So
No, we made it happen. It's okay. It's all good. So Benji is Hank's bestie from college, and we wanted to bring Benji on because he's in a very unique field of work, and it has a lot to do with grief. Benji's dad owns a funeral home. Is that the right word?
Yeah, we made the house a home. We made the funeral house a funeral home for sure.
It's a home.
It's a home.
And has your dad done this like your whole life?
Yeah, he's coming up on 40 years.
Wow.
Of in the profession, and then but about over 20 years on his own, with his own funeral home.
Got it. So he worked like with another group before?
Yeah, he worked with another funeral home in the area, but then went off on his own.
Got it. So your whole life, this has been your dad's profession?
Yes.
Got it. So I'm curious what was like talked about in your house growing up. Like, what was your concept of death and funerals, and like knowing that was your dad's field of work?
When it's like bring your parent to work day,
Yeah.
like did you just
Truly.
never bring your dad?
Yeah. He did do like talks at I remember at Hebrew school he would do like talks, and I remember like being a little bit embarrassed, at the idea of like your father coming to like talk about something so out there.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't your typical thing, but it was always in my recollection, it was just always kind of normal and talked about in our home, and it was just it was he's always been kind of just known as the funeral director in the community, like because I don't know, one thing that comes to mind is like just a little bit as like a child growing up, I remember dressing up as like a pallbearer for like Purim. Like there's like, and like if you just look at the photos, we just look like so sad. Like we wanted to be like a ninja, and we were a pallbearer. So like there's like random stuff like that. But in terms of talking about death and like in the abstract, I guess it's I didn't really like fully get a grasp on like that obviously he's a funeral director, but like I didn't really have a grasp of like that, how much that somewhat mourning and things like that were like involved with it, because I think he tried to kind of have that, even though he was still taking calls at the dinner table and things like that, but he would try to separate it emotionally.
Yeah.
Like not that death and funerals are something to be lighthearted about, but I think when you're in the business, you kind of I'm sure it's a very similar thing for in your guys' profession, and also for like doctors and things like that, but you kind of have to have some sort of sense of humor in order to get through it. And I think he's, for better or worse, he's very good at that. If you know my father, he can sometimes have kind of a sick sense of humor sometimes, but he was always good about kind of, sheltering us as children from the realities of it until he thought we were able to kind of understand it.
Got it.
And then you're now in the profession as a funeral director, right?
Yes. So I joined him in the business about 7 years ago. And I have two older siblings who are not in the business and wanted nothing to do with it. including my sister, who's the biggest Grief Street fan.
Oh,
Very sweet.
Courtney, she's a big fan.
shout out to Courtney.
Shout out Courtney. But it was always, I think, starting in college, it was always kind of like in the back of my head about like it being intriguing as a profession. I went to school for film and media, and and moved out to LA for after school. That's where I met Jordy, and
We missed you.
yeah, I know. Yes, it was very hard to leave. It was very hard to leave Los Angeles to move back here to Chicago. But I worked at a media company, working as like an editor, a video editor, and I think what was kind of missing for me was kind of human interaction, and kind of just wanted to be away from a computer for as a profession. And it's kind of odd when you think about it, like, oh, you want human interaction. It's like working at a funeral home. It kind of seems like a little counterintuitive in some ways, but the realities of the job is like, it's all human interaction. It's all dealing with people at their most vulnerable in some ways, and it's something that is not a very natural thing for me. I think in many ways I'm a very introverted person, and doing this job kind of has forced me to go against the grain in that respect and kind of become a little bit more extroverted. And now that's something, after 7 years in the business, has become it feels very natural, almost like where I force myself into being a little bit more extroverted.
Yeah, I mean, I think like dealing with people at their most vulnerable when they didn't, like Jordy and I, like we work with people at their most vulnerable, but for the most part, it's a choice.
Right.
And like, that's not a choice to come, they want nothing to do with you probably in that regard.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I imagine
100%.
that it's really difficult in that way, that you're having to manage a lot.
Yeah, it's it is kind of like, there's a lot of jokes that people like to say when they see us around town and stuff like that. It's like being like, we're the last people you want to meet kind of thing. And
Oh, it's so sad.
And it's, but it even though people like, people joke about it, I don't know. It's interesting. Just like, my father works in, the north suburbs of Chicago my whole life. And coming back to work in the place where I grew up is really interesting, because I'm just, no one's really a stranger, when we go to work. It's very much like, it's like a schmooze fest, and essentially, and it's interesting having that juxtaposition of like, being happy to see someone when you're at a funeral. I don't know. It's very interesting, but it's something that I think for my father and I, it's something that it's the reason why we do what we do, is because of working in the community and, being, if someone sees us in this, unfortunate time, and they're able to like, smile for a second for seeing a familiar face, it's like, that's what it's all about, I guess.
Sure. Okay. So like, I understand like the many parts to a funeral, but like as a funeral home director, like what would be surprising about what you do that maybe not many people think about?
So me personally, I went to mortuary science school for a year when I moved back here from Chicago. There are some bachelor degree programs and associate degree programs, but me in particular, I got a diploma in mortuary science, and you have to be licensed, in particular in the state of Illinois where we are. I think there are some states where you actually don't have to be licensed to do funeral directing, which is kind of wild.
Yeah.
But in order to, be a funeral director, there's a lot there's two aspects to it, kind of in general speaking. There's kind of what you see in media of like, you see the person in the back room, work, for lack of a better term, working on a body, like putting makeup on, things like that, or doing embalming. And these are things that everyone does have to learn who's a funeral director. And that I had to do an apprenticeship before I got licensed as well. And, but some people prefer that aspect of the profession. Me in particular, I more work with, running the services and meeting with the families. That's kind of more where I've veered into, and it's what my father mostly has done for the majority of his career as well.
And so what does the day-to-day look like for the funeral director?
It's interesting. I probably have a more specific day-to-day than the normal funeral director, I would say, because working in the family business, especially, it's just my father and I.
Yeah.
So for the most part, we work out of our house. Like, our house is the office, but not like 6 feet under, where it's like we work out of the funeral home. The funeral home is separate.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like, I go to my childhood home every day and fight the urge to regress to like being a child every day.
That's hard.
That feels tough.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah. But, I'd say most days, our phones are like attached to our hip for better or worse. And if it's the middle of the night and someone needs us, the phone is right next to our beds. And
when you say someone needs you, does that mean someone died?
For the most part, there are some times where someone just sees that it says 24 hours on our Google listing and just has a question at like 12 at midnight. Oh my God. And
you'll answer.
And you never know who's calling, so you got to answer. So they just might have a question about like, the live stream at the service tomorrow.
Do you answer and you like tell them the answer in the moment?
Oh yeah, you just exactly.
Oh gosh, you're like
sometimes you just gotta.
That was one of the things that surprised me about your profession, is that you're on call like a doctor would be.
Yes, essentially.
Or like your phone coaching,
right.
like.
Always, I have limits around my phone.
Yeah, but like a doctor is going to answer the phone because someone's in need, and. Right. I didn't realize that about funeral directing until we got into conversation about it.
Well, because I assumed like that what like the first call that's made is for like, I guess like I didn't realize that. I don't know what I thought.
Like they're the ones who come and like, collect the body.
I guess I thought it was like you do the autopsy too. I thought that was more like medical examiner.
Right. So basically, when we talk with families, let's say if, a lot of times a family will call us before a death has taken place just to have, if they have questions, and we like to tell them, to call us, so that we can help guide them with what to do, because there's a lot of people don't deal with this every day. It's not common knowledge, thank God, and. So we want to be there so that we can answer any of their questions. So it's the way the matter of how a death occurs depends on what the next steps are. So there's if there does need to be a medical examiner or coroner involved, if someone is under hospice, there's a lot. It's a lot more regimented to how things go. So there's a lot of kind of moving parts in that respect. So we like to be there. If it is 2 a.m, we like to be there because there's not a lot of people around that you can ask. So we like to kind of like to quarterback it.
Wow.
Yeah. Did
you know that? I mean, I imagine you did because your dad's been doing this your whole life. But did you know how closely you were going to be working with these families? So it's like such an intimate time for these families, right? Like whether they're calling you right before a death takes place or afterwards. I'm just wondering if you knew sort of what you signed up for.
No, I would say yes and no. I knew what I was hoping to get out of going to this business was, like I was saying, was that kind of like human connection.
Yeah.
And I've gotten that in droves, I would say, for sure. And it's still something, it's, even though I've been doing it for 7 years, it's like, yes, it feels much more natural than it did, a year into it, 3 years into it. But it's still, there's still so many things that are delicate that, even my father, who's been doing it for nearly 40 years, I mean, he's much more well-versed in how to deal with, things that are out of the ordinary, I would say. And it is just one of those things that's like, you don't know until you experience it, but you hope to be the person who can help figure things out when there are a lot of questions. But I would say I didn't know what I knew there was that human connection, but it still surprises me, every day, just like how close you can get to the families that we're serving, I guess. Right. And I think that's something that does like make me, it does, it's the thing I love about the business.
Yeah.
So when thinking about like so many people, right, it's like certain everyone dies, and so many people have like a lot of anxiety around death. And I'm just curious, like, how your relationship with death has changed and like where you feel like it's at right now.
I mean, I think there is, I mean, I don't know if you mean like in like a personal aspect or,
oh yeah, I kind of mean personal.
Sorry, personally. I mean, I think dealing with it on a day-to-day basis has kind of, given me a sense of a numbness to it, I guess.
Right.
And
desensitized.
Right. And there, it's not something that I guess I fear. I don't know if like this is I don't know if it is a common fear that people have on a day-to-day basis who don't deal with it, but it's, I don't know if it's like up there with public speaking for some people, but I'm sure it is, or some people don't think about it. But for me, I think just seeing so many, different situations and different families, and I think it is one of those things that, unfortunately, it's just, we've seen such, we've seen people live full lives and people live short lives, and it's just one of those things. It's just it's unfortunately something that we have to understand, that it is unfortunately the way the world works sometimes. And if we don't have that understanding, like, I think it would be hard to do our business a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes sense, because I feel like, a lot of people, it's sort of like an if, and I imagine working in the field, it solidifies that it's just a when.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say so. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I guess you had a recent medical scare. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that, and maybe if that impacted the way that you view death or your relationship with it.
Definitely. So this past June, I had what they started to call a cardiac event, but in reality was I had a heart attack, essentially. So for about 2 weeks, I was experiencing some chest pain that from as many people do, I'm sure they Google heart pain Reddit on Google and see what comes up. I guess Reddit's the new WebMD, maybe.
Right.
That's what Hank says.
Yeah, exactly. So from seeing the symptoms I was feeling, which was a little bit of pressure in my chest, and it feels silly to say now, but a little bit of numbness in my arm, I just kind of I saw people experience the same symptoms that I had, and they just said it was acid reflux or GERD is what they would say as well. So I kind of wrote it off on that. It didn't even cross my mind that it could be something bigger than that. And after about 2 weeks, I fell asleep. I fell asleep on the couch, as I do, as my wife would say, I do every night. And every night she has to wake me up and in a stupor, just shepherd me to bed. And I walked up the stairs, and I immediately felt this similar pressure, but heightened to an extreme degree. So much so that I fell to the bathroom floor. I felt sick. I felt a little. I vomited, and I was still telling myself that, like, man, this acid reflux is really intense. Like,
scary.
It's scary. Yeah. So I got into the bathtub. I had the shower running like cold water on myself, and I told my wife, as she's saying, like, should we call the ambulance? I'm like, no, just get the Tums, like the Tums.
Tums will save me.
Yeah, Tums will save me. Yeah, so she got
really
the Tums.
Committed to this acid reflux.
Exactly. So, and after, I'd say about an hour, my symptoms kind of subsided. I was, extremely pale, but I told myself that that in the morning I would go to the hospital to get it checked out. Again, not thinking that it was anything more, but kind of the history of it was.
So you made it through the night?
So you just
I made it through.
I went to sleep.
I went to sleep. Yeah, I put on my podcast, and I went to sleep, and I was like,
wow.
we'll check it in the morning. And
what was Whitney thinking during this time? Sorry, I just have to know. Whitney is Benji's wife.
Yeah, Whitney is my wife, and she, to her credit, was ready to call the ambulance, but I told her not to, and was very nervous for me. But I think the fact that I kind of came to and seemed all right, I think she was like, okay, but you're going in the morning.
Yeah.
And so I slept through the night and woke up, thank God, and the next morning, I went to the hospital. So the history of it, though, is this past September, my father actually had a triple bypass surgery. He didn't have a heart attack, but was feeling some symptoms that took him to the hospital. Had him do a stress test. So there were some things that I knew that I would need to go. That could only be looked at a hospital, at an emergency room. Like if I went to an urgent care, there are some tests that they might not have been able to check. So I went to the hospital. Whitney had a meeting that she was going to do her meeting and then meet me at the hospital. I'm there. I'm in the waiting room, and they're doing a couple tests. Like, honestly, don't even come. Like, I'll be home in a second. And everything came back normal. My EKG was normal. But there's one test that I knew to ask for, which of course they were already going to do. It's called troponin levels, and this is essentially lets them know if there was some sort of cardiac event that happened. And to my knowledge, anything above the number 25 for this troponin level is shows that you had some sort of event. And mine had reached a level of 5,000.
Oh my God.
So,
wow.
So they said, you're staying here. We're going to do an echocardiogram on you. And from the echocardiogram, they saw that there was the left side of my heart was not pumping with the rest of it. But the rest of my heart was overcompensating for it. So that's why it wasn't showing in the EKG. So
yeah.
That's why it is important in this sense, because if I had gone to another, not this hospital, maybe somewhere else where they check the EKG and all my numbers look normal, if they didn't check for this one level, they might not have known that this was going on.
Wow.
So they kept me overnight and telling me that I was going to be doing an angiogram, which Jordy, I know that you're aware of of the cath lab that is involved with this.
Yep.
Yeah, all too well. And so in the angiogram, they found that my LAD had a 95% blockage in the artery.
Oh my
so
gosh.
they put two stents in, and then I stayed another night in the hospital, and then they sent me home the next day. And here we are.
What was going through your mind? Like, I'm like wondering how you were feeling mentally and emotionally during that time.
I felt a little removed from the situation, I guess, is the best way I could describe it. So also a little situation that was going on separately is that my wife is currently pregnant as well. And the day that I was going in for the procedure, for the stent procedure, was also her first ultrasound. At a separate hospital. So I think a lot of my brain was kind of with her and with that, and kind of just like, but not being like angry that like I couldn't be with her or something, or I felt bad that obviously I couldn't be with her, but I think that both of us just kind of had to have like a sense of humor about it, just being like, the day before she had her first ultrasound, I was having an echocardiogram, which was essentially an ultrasound of them putting like the jelly on my chest and like doing it. Like, it's just, you just had to have a sense of humor about it. So I think, and they didn't use the words heart attack until I came out of the stent procedure. They were always saying cardiac event,
which maybe is like helpful to not fully know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not sure if they were doing that for my, to not freak me out, or if it was just one of those things that like, once they got in there and really got to see what was going on, that they're like, oh no, that was a heart attack kind of thing. Cause I came up and my wife said heart attack, and I was like, oh, like, did they say that? Like, cause I guess they told them like when I was still in the cath lab, I guess. But yeah, so it was something that I couldn't really grasp when I was in the hospital, and even, a few months after the fact, I'm still kind of dealing with, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. It's just overall just feels a little bizarre that I'm going through this at this age, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. You're in your early 30s, and it's not common for someone in their early 30s to have a cardiac event or heart attack. So that makes sense.
Yeah. And it was one of those things that like when you're in the hospital and people, they kind of look at you surprised a little bit, and, wondering why you're there and kind of thing. And it's something that still continues to happen when I go in for checkups, or if I see different doctors and things like that. And
you're not like, you don't meet their like typical profile.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know, it doesn't feel great sometimes to be like an anomaly, I guess, in that sense. I can relate. But yeah, I'm sure. Exactly. And it's good and bad, I guess. And I'm because, Jordy, from, listening to the podcast and obviously, knowing about your, hearing about what your journey and stuff like that, it's sometimes being an anomaly is nice because you're being checked on like nobody's business, I think. Yeah. And so that feels nice, is because but also in that respect, like, there's still a lot of question marks on what happened with me, and there's not like oh, this happened, so that's
not like
what
resolved at all.
Exactly. Yeah. Because for my all my numbers were good, everything was good. It's just kind of like they just say, oh, it's it's probably genetic kind of thing. So and they just kind of leave it at that. So
which doesn't give you like a ton of answers.
No, exactly. It'd kind of be nice if they were like, oh, like, you eat too much McDonald's, like that's, so stop eating McDonald's kind of thing. It's like, I do eat too much McDonald's. So like that is the case. That is the case in many ways, but since, cholesterol and whatever numbers that would ultimately say that, are all in the normal range. That's just,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it sucks when, like, I think the outlier piece, it's like when you don't fit the typical profile, then there's more questions as to like what to do in that scenario. And like for you, that's obviously the case. For me, like having like medical issues with my baby, like it's just like when you don't fit the general idea, then you don't have as much of a protocol. Like in medical school, they're like, if you hear hooves, think a horse, not a zebra. So
Right.
then like you can get sometimes dismissed a little bit more eventually also.
And I think when they say, like, I know I have this and you had this, when I ask questions about like, okay, like, can this happen from this or this happen from this? And they're like, oh, like that's so unlikely. And I'm like, yeah, like I already fit the bill for like what we thought wasn't really going to happen. So like that means nothing to me.
Right. Like stats don't.
Yeah, really stats don't like mean anything anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty like, when you think about like you, not to say that like you were close to dying, but like you kind of saw death a little bit closer in that moment.
Yeah.
And then in the meantime your wife is creating life. Like the juxtaposition of that while you're a funeral director, it's like pretty fucking insane.
Yeah, that's like a lot at once.
Yeah. And it's good to know we can curse on this podcast, right?
Yes,
yeah.
It's explicit. It's explicit.
Okay, great. Okay, I was wondering. But yeah, I think what my job I think has given me that I'm so thankful for is perspective. I think in a lot of ways. I mean, even when I found myself like myself in the situation in the hospital and things like that, it's still just my job. Just every day, there's such shitty things happening to everyone. It's just like of course, like when you're going through something personally, like you want to say like why me kind of thing, but it's like I think it is important for everyone to have a certain perspective of just being like, to kind of remove yourself from the situation. I think in a lot of ways it does help deal with it mentally, but maybe, I don't know, maybe in some ways that you're just delaying the inevitable of having to deal with it yourself. So that's still something I'm trying to figure out.
Okay, this is really personal and we can like not put it in, but just because as a funeral director, and like you don't have to tell me if you have like a will, but I'm just curious, like do you know what you would want to happen, like now that you are very intimate with all the parts around funeral home? Like do you have an idea
of like what my end of life looks like? Yes and no. It's interesting because our funeral home is just based on where we live in the North Shore. We're a predominantly Jewish funeral home. That's and in the Jewish religion, many things are changing day to day, but for the most part, people are buried at a cemetery, and in many ways, I really do love the way that the Jewish people do burials. I guess, and maybe, I don't know if that's some sort of thing that's just because I deal with it on a day-to-day that I believe, but I think that, and to give you kind of an idea, traditionally, when a Jewish person is buried, there's a couple things. You're buried in a simple wood casket with no adornment to it. You're typically to be buried in a shroud, and the reason you're buried in a shroud is the idea that we kind of all go back, on an equal playing field, essentially. And sometimes if you're more religious, you have what's called a have what's called the Hever Kadisha, come in to do a ritual washing. That's a more for if you're more Orthodox or even conservative, but there are some people who are Reformed who do that as well. But I think for myself, I think right now that I do like the idea of a Jewish burial, but the things are trending in a way where people are leaning more towards doing cremation, and that's for a number of different reasons. Some people it's for because in many ways it is a cheaper option, but also in many ways because I think people in younger generations, I think they believe that and in a Jewish service that you talk about this as well, but your body is just a body at that time, after death, that your body's just a body but your soul is what is what lives on. So in many ways it's like, I understand that people are going more towards cremation and things like that because it's, if you can separate yourself from the soul from your body, and if you can celebrate a person doing a memorial service, you don't necessarily need it's not great for my business to say this, but you don't necessarily need a full-fledged, burial funeral service or some, there's creative ways that you can celebrate a person that maybe strays from the traditional. So
yeah. I mean, I took a death and dying class when I was in college, and as part of that, I had to plan my own funeral. It was like a very interesting class. I remember calling you and telling you.
You like told me the whole plan, and I was like, oh, okay, like we're 20.
I think it was 21.
Or 21. I was just like, this feels heavy.
And I was like, okay, I'm going to have like a compostable box, and I'm going to have all my friends and family decorate it. And this like whole plan I should go find this
you
somewhere.
should.
I remember telling my mom, and she like was really uncomfortable. Like,
do you have it like in your will?
Okay, I have it in my will, but it's not that.
It's not the same as it was when you were 21.
Okay, so yeah, because it's like when you have children, it's like
you have to make plans like that.
Yeah, so I don't know, like I guess I decided like 5 years. Well, like no, I guess 4 years ago. I think I did it like. I don't remember when I did this, but it's not the compostable box. And
what is it?
I can't really remember. I just remember I think it might be to be buried, but then my husband said cremated, and I was like, wait, but I want to be with you. So like, I don't like that. I don't want to be alone.
Right. There are ones that are like, you can be...
Oh, it's cheaper if you go on top of each other. You can do that, right?
You could do that. Well, exactly.
Okay, so that's a deal. And then, no, I was thinking, I know they have something where you can like be turned into like stones, and then you can like give the stones to like your loved ones.
Is that...
So like, I think that's what I want to do.
Oh, stones.
Yeah, I forgot what the name of the company is, but I wrote it down somewhere.
Like a rock stone or like a
like
diamond?
really beautiful like rocks.
Ooh,
and then like you can make like a lot of them, and then like everyone can have a little piece of you.
That's sweet.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of cool.
I hate that you have a name of a company.
Yeah, I was like targeted on Instagram.
Oh my gosh.
My uncle was put into a pillow. Well, okay, so
what?
So my uncle, he died a couple months ago, and he like very in line of who he is. Like he like prepaid the funeral home to do a cremation, but like didn't like it's just, he was like got a box, so like it was very cheap, and my mom's like, I'm not just picking up a box of like his ashes, like what are we so we got it into a compostable pillow, and then we went because he lived in Hawaii, and we took a boat out, and you can put the pillow in the water, and it like like decompose.
It like dissolves.
Yeah. And
it's really pretty.
It's great.
Like lots of things.
So many options.
There's so many options.
How can one choose?
But it's like
exactly
insane, the idea of someone like going to you when they're alive, and here's my plot of like, it's just such a crazy concept because people are so fearful of death.
Yeah.
And then like heavily planned for it. It's just a very So many juxtapositions.
Yes.
And it's, I think it is nice when someone can, when they're at a time in their life when they, have all their faculties, available to them, that where they can express exactly how they want something. But, at the very least, I think it is important to, with your loved ones, whether it is, your family or your significant other, it's important to kind of talk about these things. But, but I can also wholeheartedly say that my wife and I don't think we have had this conversation.
I was about to ask.
So interesting.
Exactly.
So interesting.
Right. We there is a little. I do kind of try to leave a little bit of like separation of church and state a little bit with my job.
And you're like in it all day. I understand.
Exactly. But actually, now that I think about it, no, we have discussed it a little bit. I think it's more myself that like I haven't fully grasped it, I guess.
Yeah.
And but I know my wife has thought about it and has told me her wishes and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting. So it makes it easier for families if you like.
I think so. Well, because I think what it comes down to is, I mean, we say this as well because it's like you want to honor the person and what their wishes are, but in a lot of ways too, something that we say in the funeral business is like a funeral, you're honoring the dead, but it is for the living essentially.
Right.
Yeah. It is the funeral service is a part of the grieving process, and having to go through it does help people. What we say is there's a psalm called the 23rd Psalm that we say at every funeral service, and you say, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and there are there are some clergy members who like to emphasize that word through is like we're not done with the grieving process at the funeral service. It's something that we have to get through, and it's a constant thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that is very important. It's just the first step. Mm-hmm. And it's something that you might not ever, get over, but hopefully it's something that with time gets a little easier. But yeah.
Wow.
And so as a funeral director, we hope that we can just make it at least a little bit easier on the family and try our best to help serve them in that way.
Right.
What have you, I guess, if there are like a couple of takeaways from working with people who are actively grieving pretty recently, what are some of the things that you've seen have been most comforting or helpful to them in their most vulnerable times?
Mm-hmm. I think even though this is something that, we've been doing for a number of years and it's something that I feel comfortable in, it's like, I would never try to act like I know what someone's going through. And if someone asks me like that question is how do I get through this? And I know it's something that Hank has discussed a lot, is how much his support groups have been. I think in many ways, there's grief support groups that we like to, direct people to. Yeah. And even more in a specific way based on how someone maybe does pass is there's people who, are looking to help each other, trying to find meaning in this grieving process, that it's hard for someone who has not gone through this, that specific situation to understand. And, I don't think we should act like we do understand it. But I think that finding people who have dealt with similar situations and who can commiserate with you, I think that is the best way to help deal with it, to help deal with, grief in that way.
So finding community of people who have been through something
alone.
Similar. Yeah,
Definitely.
That makes a lot of sense.
100%.
And I just think it's such a noble profession, I guess, to like put yourself.
That's what I keep saying.
Yeah, I feel like it is though, to like put yourself in the position to like be with people who are grieving, because like can be scary and uncomfortable. And so to be there in that time of need, every day answering calls in the middle of the night, like,
Yeah, I don't think people know that.
yeah,
Like, I don't think,
exactly.
I think people
Right.
sometimes are like, oh, it's the business of death, like making money off of people dying. Like, sometimes I
Yeah.
feel like that can be said, and it's like
Yeah.
the
100%.
like compassion and care and dedication is like pretty unmatched that you like do as a funeral director and owning a funeral home.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, just like any profession, there's going to be people who, have that, like, that bad reputation that people kind of get with, with dealing with a funeral director. And that, it's with, like I said, it's with any profession,
Right.
but
Yep.
I think what's most important with us is that, like, is understanding that, like, it is that, like, us being by the phones and things like that. It's like, we're here when you need us.
Yeah.
And if it is just, if it is just like a question that someone has, or if it is, something down the line where someone, it's been years after their loved one has passed and they have, a question about something or need something, we just try to be there. And I think that's all you can do. I think that's all, we just want to, be a resource for people. And
I mean, you're doing such meaningful work.
Yeah.
it's very sweet. It's very sweet of you say, but it's like, it's one of the, it is, you try to just be there for your community and help people because, we're another thing, going back to like the perspective of things. It's like, day in, day out, I get to hear these like eulogies that these family members are giving to their loved one and telling us about this person's, like, amazing, it doesn't always have to be an amazing life or a vast life. It could be a simple life, but tell us that how they found meaning in their life. And I think that's what's so important. That's what's so important.
Yeah.
Is that everyone has, no matter what their profession was, like, everyone has meaning in this life. I like to think so.
Right.
I do feel like in many ways it is just another. I don't feel like
You're just minimizing. That's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. You're minimizing.
You're being
Okay, you're
humble
right.
and special.
Yeah.
You're
But
right.
it's
You're right.
not-
I'm
not-
special.
not
I'm
many
amazing.
people-
Yeah.
Not many people would sign up to take phone calls 24/7, even if it was just a question around
Yeah.
something really trivial
Trivial,
for
yeah.
like
Yeah.
the idea that someone might need you. I mean, that's
Right.
I have certainty in that.
Yeah. And I think, like what you were saying, you get to listen to these eulogies day in and day out. You're like witnessing and being a part of like human connection, and you're able to see, what someone means to someone, and I think that that's so cool. Like, you maybe didn't know that person, but you can see the impact that that person had on all of
Yeah.
the people that love them. And that's something really beautiful to witness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something that, kind of a motto that my dad has instilled in, like, running his business, and something that my mom, or my dad's mother, kind of instilled in him. It's a Jewish proverb. I don't know if it's a proverb or what you call it, but it's called "Crown of a Good Name," and it's essentially, to boil it down, it says that the name that you have, like, to your family, to your friends, to your community, is everything. So it's like, and that's what these funeral services, I believe, like, should be saying, is that, like, you're trying to say, like, what this person's name means to you, and how that name, like, even when someone has passed, it's that name that, to say a cliche, it's like, I've heard rabbis say how you die twice. I know this is probably something that, people have heard many times, but it's like, it's when, we have the funeral service, the body is buried, but, like, the second time that you die is when the last person that, that knew you or says your name for the last time. So
Yeah.
they say, as long as you tell these stories of this person and speak about them, you know, it's someone's soul can truly never die. It's that
that's really sweet.
Yeah.
It's like keeping the legacy alive.
Yeah.
100%.
Which I love.
I think it's so important. And that's why I think, you know, I don't know. I think it's just, my memory is so bad that it's like there's many things that like I wish I would have like written down when I was like younger or something. It's just like these things that like are just lost in the ether of time, you know. That I wish I could tell like, you know, my kids one day. But
right. Wow. Well, thanks for coming on and sharing something about that. Like, I didn't really want to talk about all these things you know, it's like when you're going through all this shit, I'm like, this is what I think about, that like I'm smiling, but like
you like want to cry.
It's like one of us is gonna have to do a eulogy.
Yeah.
Unless like something happens with both of us in the same exact moment.
Like we both die in a freak accident.
That fucking sucks.
Yeah, I know. But I've heard like so many beautiful eulogies over the years.
Okay,
You're like, we're moving on.
Yeah, we're not like coming out of that. I just like, that sucks. Okay,
yeah, but anyway, I think you've like shed a lot of light on what it looks like to work in this industry, and that there's like you were saying, there's so much compassion and empathy there. And I think that it's nice to know that resources like you guys exist, because I don't even know if many people recognize that, you know, like you might feel really alone in having to make all of these decisions, and you are saying like, hey, come here, like we got you.
Yeah. And I think, it's, you know, in a time when like things are, you call somewhere and you get like a robot voice, you know, it's it's
you're like really humanizing it.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe in 10 years, that's what, you know, you call our business and you'll get like a Google Voice thing. I don't know. Who knows? But
I hope not.
I hope not too.
If I was in that position and I called and you answered, I would be really thrilled.
Right. Exactly. Say your name after the beep. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Benj, for joining us and giving us some insight into the business of death, because it's really interesting. And
and thank you guys for doing this amazing podcast.
Because we haven't done this in a while.
We haven't done it in a little bit.
Because we haven't been in person.
We've been like doing virtual podcast interviewing.
I have something to say about the episode.
Okay.
I'm going to jump in, because I was thinking as I was coming here earlier of just like the subject of death is so taboo.
Yeah.
And no one really wants to talk about it. And then I was thinking, okay, why is it so taboo? Why do people feel so uncomfortable with the idea of our mortality? And then I was thinking, I don't really love to be on a bad day, like 55-minute drive from you, because I like to be able to like see my people. So the idea of like death is just like you're losing out on that.
Yeah.
But then I talk a lot about the distance in our 50-minute drive and how I wish we lived like,
it's
I don't know.
It's also funny because it like takes me 20 minutes to get to your house, but it does take you longer to get to me.
And so then I talk so openly about how sometimes I wish they could go to school together, our kids. But then, I mean, we do talk about death a lot, but I feel like just in general, people don't.
Yeah.
And then even a funeral director, Benji, who spends his entire life talking about death, doesn't really talk about death with his wife.
Yeah. Like it sounds like she was more, she had more of an idea of what she wanted and those kinds of things, and that Benji was sort of like, nope, I don't have a will. Like, haven't really like thought too much into it, because I'm imagining working in that all day, you like want some separation. Mm-hmm. As we know, like working in the therapy field, it's like you compartmentalize a bit.
Right.
And so I imagine he wants some distance from that. On a funny note, I just wanted to bring up, Benji talked about how he was a pallbearer for Purim one year,
which is like a Jewish holiday where you dress up.
It's like similar to Halloween in the sense that you wear a costume. And he was telling us like, yeah, my dad like dressed us as pallbearers. And I thought that was hilarious. And Hank was like laughing from the other room listening. And then last night, Erica and I are talking, and I'm like, wasn't that so funny? And she's like, I don't know what a pallbearer is. She's like, I was just like nodding along.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what that is. And
I
just
knew it
thought
was
that-
like something funeral related, but then I also imagined like a picture of a bear, and I was like, I know that this is wrong, but I just didn't know what was happening.
I know. I thought that was so funny.
So does anyone else know what that is?
Did anyone else? We'll put up a poll on our Instagram.
We actually have to do this because
We
we
will.
always talk about it.
I know,
putting
I
polls
know.
up, and then we don't.
I know. So we'll put up a poll of whether or not
How do you spell
know what a pallbearer is. I don't know the spelling.
Okay, well,
Oh, we're turning to Google, and we're going to find out the spelling of pallbearer.
Paul. Okay. Well, it's not.
Is it like Pall?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't do 93 minus 7, but
you can.
I can spell
It's not.
pallbearer.
Let me tell you, it is not Paul
Right.
Bear.
Right.
It's not a pallbearer.
Yeah.
It is a pallbearer.
Yeah.
Pallbearer.
Yeah.
A person who helps to carry the coffin at a funeral.
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty wild that that's what he would dress up.
It's like really funny.
Okay, so
Actually
in Roman
hilarious.
times, a soldier wore a cape or cloak called the pallium. In medieval times, the term was shortened to pall, and Christians would use a pall to cover their loved ones. Thus, pallbearer is used to signify someone who bears the coffin
Yep.
while the pall covers.
Yep.
There we go.
Now we know.
The more you know.
The more you know, the more you know. So that was just one like funny little tidbit from our conversation. But yeah, I just thought it was so interesting. I was so curious.
And also the fact that he has to answer the phone on call. That was
so
wild to
we had
me.
no idea that I did know because I've talked to Benji about this before, like just that he has to be on call and answer the phone like 24/7.
Wow.
But like when you think about people who are on call, you think of like a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
You don't typically think funeral director,
Right.
but it makes sense because, you know, people are dying at all times of
Yeah.
the day and night. So yeah, you always have to be on call. And I think just what I thought about was like how beautiful it is that there are people like Benji who can walk through that like really vulnerable, intimate time in someone's life when they're sort of like maybe in shock, maybe I don't know what the other word I was thinking of was, but like I guess maybe like surrealness, like
Yeah.
the reality hasn't really set in, and he gets to like be there to like comfort them. And like what he kept coming back to is like we just get to be there to like walk them through the process and like just be of service to them and answer any questions they might have. And I just thought that was really sweet. And if anyone's watched 6 Feet Under, it's like really different vibes than 6 Feet Under gives.
Right.
Yeah, like I would definitely be going to the Goldman funeral group.
Yeah. God. What a terrible
thing to say, but
Yeah.
Benji would appreciate the business.
Yeah. And you just have to bring humor in, right?
Of course. And I wanted to ask him about, I remember when Hank like walked into the room after getting a phone call and he's like, Benji just had a heart attack. I was like, what? Like I couldn't compute that he's like in his early 30s, he had a heart attack, and like thank goodness he is okay. But he walks into the room and says that, and then I knew we wanted to have him on the podcast. So I was like thinking, when you're faced with your own mortality, how does that change your relationship with death when you've had this really unique relationship? And so it was really interesting to hear him sort of talk about that experience and how it's influenced him.
Yeah, I did think that was interesting too.
Yeah. So we loved having Benji on. It's always fun to talk to a friend, and it's always fun to learn something new. And so I hope you guys enjoyed the episode as much as we did.
Yep. And as we are going through the next few weeks, we'll hope to do more intros. Jordy will be recovering from yet another craniotomy. So if I need to, I'll give a short update.
Yep.
but we hope to keep you updated along the way.
Yeah, and we're still recording. We recorded.
Oh, I remember what we were going to say.
What?
That we didn't get to in our intro. Okay, so this is, sorry, everyone has to think back to what we were going to say. Jordy was kind of having her seizure in my bed, and Alex is talking to Jordy's hand.
Oh yeah, she's just like whispering things to my hand because that's where I was feeling it, and I'm like, what are you saying? She's like, nothing, like don't worry about it. And then Erica's like, well, I'm gonna talk to your tumor, and then she just starts cussing like in my face at the tumor
because I said, you know those videos where they talk about how how plants thrive when you say loving things to it,
right.
And when you're like mean to them, they don't grow. So I thought, let me just cuss Gus out so that
right.
his growth is stunted.
Yeah.
So
I have like Alex on the floor next to me, like whispering sweet nothings to my hand.
Yeah.
And then I have Hank holding my feet.
Yeah.
And then I have Erica screaming like explicit words at my face.
I hope it worked.
Yeah, I hope it worked too. It worked in the sense that I didn't have a full-on seizure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a really different experience than I've had in the past when I've had a seizure.
That's fair.
I had like company and we were just like chatting in between.
I know.
So it was like
Ramsey was guarding the children.
Yeah, Ramsey was guarding the children. We just hear like the children are like, I don't want to watch this show. And Ramsey's like putting on 3-minute timers.
And like switching TV shows.
Switching different TV shows. He really held down the fort for us. Yeah, that was wild. It's weird that it's become like a normal
I know
part of this whole thing.
Yeah, we were saying how the first time you got a seizure after you got Gus out the first time, it was like a really big deal. Like everyone drove to your house right away.
Huge. Like I remember crying and like I called you guys and I was like, I don't want to worry you. My parents came over. Like it was a whole thing.
And now
then I'm like, oh, I've had like a lot of seizures since then. Yeah. And now I know, and they're not fun, but it's like I know what to do and that it's going to be okay.
Right.
So yeah, I guess also back when I had the first one, it's like I didn't know what was happening in there.
Yeah, now you have a better idea.
Like, I fully know like there's a tumor in my head. So that's why I'm having seizures. Before it was like, oh, is it back? Is it not back? Like,
oh, that was a terrible
that was
time.
so hard. Yeah, I think I'm curious. Maybe we should do a little highs and lows of the week.
Okay.
That sounds fun.
Okay, you go first.
Getting into the trial, I would say, was a high. And also yesterday, me, you, and Alex went. And it's like very rare. We hang out a lot, but it's usually with our children. So when you hang out with your children, it's like you're together in the same space for like, let's say 5 hours. But there's very little actual conversation that's happening among the adults because it's complete chaos. So it was really nice to be with you and Alex and just go to breakfast. And then like we went and got these like really cool forever bracelets.
Yeah.
And, like just walked around, and
it was a really nice morning.
A really nice day. And then we just like spent the day at your house and ordered in food, and Katie came over, and then Alex went home to tend to her sourdough bread, and then she came back. With Rory, and it was just like such a nice day. I'm sad it ended with like the seizure experience, but it was just a really nice day. Felt like that's exactly what I was waiting for when I was in Boston, what I was needing.
I know.
So it felt really nice.
And then the low is the seizure.
No, I think the low, I'm like, when did I have that other seizure? That was the low. Monday.
I think, was that just Monday?
I think so.
Oh, shit.
I think so.
That's crazy. Oh, yeah. Because, yeah.
So that was probably my low, because that was a big seizure. Not a fun one.
No.
And like afterwards, I like couldn't open my hand. Like my brain was saying, open your left hand. And like I couldn't do it. And I kind of thought like, oh, have I just like lost my abilities in my left hand? Thankfully they came back, but it was pretty scary. So I would say that was my low.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
that would be your low.
Yeah. What about you?
My low would be Emma having asthma, like attack. Yeah, whenever she's viral induced asthma.
Yeah.
And then has to get on the nebulizer, and it's just scary overnight because she's been hospitalized before.
Yeah.
So I am always thinking about how many meds to give her versus not, versus like making sure I act swiftly enough. So I think that would be the low, because it was just kind of scary that one day. There's always like one hard
day.
day.
It's so scary because it's like any common cold. It's
I
like
know.
that's not a thing for Emma.
I know.
It's like always.
And now I like really see that
Yeah.
with her little brother who can have a cold, and like you can just hear it that she can't like breathe that well. So I would say that was my low. And Ramsey was out of town on a work trip, and then Emma got my nanny sick, so that was just
stressful.
a lot. But I would say my high was yesterday minus the seizure of just like being with her people.
Yeah,
that always makes me feel very fulfilled.
Yeah, it's so fun and so nice. I'm so grateful to be home.
Me fucking too.
Yeah, it's just so much nicer to be near family and friends and in my own bed and with my dogs and obviously my son.
Yeah.
And
but
just
all the things
to be back. Yeah, just to be back home.
Yep.
So thanks to all the listeners. We got really nice feedback.
I know.
On our episode last week.
It
really touched my heart.
Oh, that's like, really sweet.
Yeah, I was having.
I mean, you're like making like. We are. I know. It's just like your circumstances are the ones that like are just really continue to be terrible and shitty. Like I'm just calling it like it is.
Yeah.
And it's just like we really did this for like ourselves at first.
We did. We were like, okay, like Jordy might not be able to work that much. Like, how can we do something together using our professional experience?
Yeah.
And it was like so experimental. Like we didn't
just
know
like
what we were. Yeah, we didn't know what we were doing. Like
I know.
It was kind of a mess, and we just jumped into it. And the feedback has just been so sweet.
I know.
And from people we don't know.
And that's the wild part.
That's the crazy part. Like I was looking at we use this thing called Buzzsprout, and it like tells you where people are listening from. Mm-hmm. There's been like over 1,000 cities that people are listening from.
That's wild.
Like, how do they find us? Like, I'm just so baffled by the whole thing that
I know it only started a few months ago.
Yeah, like in April. It's just, it just makes me realize like, oh, this was needed. Mm-hmm. And it feels really fulfilling to be able to provide a space or an escape for people to listen to something or to learn something. And especially for me now, because I'm not able to work, it just feels so nice to know that I'm making some sort of positive impact on people. So thank you to all the people that listen. It means the world to us.
It does.
And we're just grateful. So I hope that you'll tune in next week. We have another really interesting guest.
Oh yeah, I'm excited. Tune in.
Okay, bye. Thanks so much for listening to Grief Street. We put out new episodes every Monday. If you'd like to support us, give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel to find the video version of our episodes. Please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts and give us a 5-star review. We would love to hear from you and get some feedback. If you'd like to contact us, please email griefstreetpodcast@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 508-474-3378. That's 508-GRIEFST. Our theme song is Hepcat Jive, courtesy of purpleplanet.com. We'll see you next time.